In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit.
Amen.
Amen. Good and gracious God, as we enter into this topic tonight, may you grace this conversation, this presenter, Mrs. Severson. You may continue to use this conversation, Lord God, in a way that we can learn about what to do, what to say, and how to be able to approach some difficult topics, but also do it with your grace, with your mercy, and with your truth. We ask this through Christ our Lord.
Amen.
Amen. Thank you all for coming and taking time out of your evenings. I know it's a very busy time. The book, The Anxious Generation, is a book that I read for professional development, and I ended up getting the most out of it as a parent than I think I've ever had out of a book. I have implemented a lot of the things that we're going to be discussing in my own life. And just for a little bit of background, I've been at ICS, it's my 7th year as a school counselor, and I also work in private practice as well. And before this, I was in public school for about 10 years. And I have a 4th grader here. He started in the preschool program, and he's been all the way through. So you guys are also my community, and I want to make sure that you guys have the same knowledge that I do. The format I went with tonight, I don't want to be up here lecturing and presenting, so this really, I'm hoping for a lot of discussion, and hopefully we can also keep it a judgment-free zone. We listen, we don't judge. And what I decided to do is I found a 45-minute video from the author where he's actually talking about the book, and he shows the charts and the data and all those things. So I broke the video down into small bits, and so we'll watch it together, have a couple discussion questions, and kind of go back and forth that way. So this way you can actually hear it right from the author instead of myself. So without further ado, we'll get started.
Hi, my name is Jonathan Haidt. I'm the author of The Anxious Generation, How the Great Rewiring of Childhood is Causing an Epidemic of Mental Illness. I get invited to speak at schools or parents groups all the time, and I can't always make it. So I made this video for you to show in a group of parents or group of teachers to help you understand what's happening and to see that there's so much we can do to fix this problem. I'm going to be talking today a lot about collective action because the solutions to this problem are actually fairly simple, although the work is hard. If we do it together, we can get it done pretty quickly too. So I want to start this talk with 2 statistics that are really haunting me. One is 50%. That's the percentage of American teens who say that they are online almost constantly. That doesn't mean they're literally looking at their phone 16 hours a day. That would be impossible. But it means that the phone is always in their hand, and they're always checking it, and there's always drama going on. And even when they're in class, or even when they're at the dinner table, or when you think they're talking to you, they're never fully present. They're always thinking in part about what's going on their phone. So that's 50%. Here's the other statistic, which I just learned a week ago. 40%. That's the percentage of American 2-year-olds who have their own iPad. It's just become normal to give toddlers an iPad, which makes them quiet, keeps them entertained, but as we'll see, it probably is going to be bad for their development. Those 2 statistics together show us that our kids, or at least half of them, now have a phone-based childhood. The rest of this talk is about what this phone-based childhood is doing to kids and what we can do to roll it back. So to begin thinking about this, I'd like you to imagine tree roots. Think about the way that the roots of a tree grow out into the world, and where they go is decided by what they encounter. So in this photograph, you can see a tree whose roots are going out over some tiles, and wherever water is available, that's where they grow and go down into. Here's an image of a tree that grew up behind a Civil War era tombstone, and the tree ended up growing around the tombstone. And I'd like to suggest that in many ways our children's minds have now grown around their smartphones. It's clearly the case that all of us, in using our phones so much, all of us are finding that our bodies are changing. Doctors are finding more cases of neck problems, wrist problems, pinky problems. And this is probably especially an issue if you're young and your bones are growing around the phone as you're holding it. One place where we know that children's brains are growing around their phones is their eyeballs. There's been a substantial increase in myopia, nearsightedness, around the world. And it appears to be because our kids are spending so much time indoors looking at a screen, close up, blue light. And if we would just give them an hour or two a day of time outside, long vision sunlight, we'd cure it. Another example of how this phone-based childhood is changing bodies is obesity. Obesity rates are increasing, and they seem to be linked to the big increase in screen time that our kids are now having. In fact, one study found that for every additional hour of social media time, there was a 62% increase in the likelihood of that child developing an eating disorder in subsequent years. So in a metaphorical sense, and almost in a real sense, our kids' brains are growing around their phones. Here's a photo of an actual Gen Z brain. Okay, it's not an actual photograph. I asked the AI to make it for me, but this is kind of what I think is happening. The Anxious Generation tells the story of the great rewiring of childhood, which is a tragedy in 2 acts. In Act 1, we lose the play-based childhood, kind of gradually between around 1990 and 2010. In Act 2, the phone-based childhood comes storming in very, very quickly, very suddenly, between 2010 and 2015. I can summarize the whole book in a single sentence. We have overprotected our children in the real world, and we have underprotected them online. In the rest of my talk, I'm going to cover 6 topics that show what has happened since the Great Rewiring, and then 2 sections on how we get out of it with collective action. I've already talked about a few of the physical harms. Now let's talk about mental illness. I first got into this topic because I'm a college professor. I teach students at New York University's Stern School of Business. I've been a professor since 1995. I thought I knew college students. But the students who began arriving around 2014 were different. A lot of us noticed this. The students coming in then were a lot more anxious. They were more fragile, more easily harmed or offended. Something was different about them. Our intuition was backed up by research a couple of years later. This graph shows the percentage of students with various disabilities. In 2012, all the students were millennials, and those were the rates. But then Gen Z begins to arrive, those born 1996 and later, and look what happens. The growth is especially in psychological and psychiatric disorders. In this graph, you can see how various psychiatric disorders have increased since 2010. In all the slides I'm going to show, there's really no trend before 2010. And then you'll see I've highlighted with a kind of a pink box the period from 2010 to 2015 when everything changes. So in this slide, you can see that anxiety and depression have always been the most common reasons why college students come into the mental health center. But you can also see that the levels begin rising in the early 2010s, soon after 2010, and that now almost a quarter of our college students have an anxiety disorder. When we break up these data by generation, what we see is that it only really hit the youngest people. Older people didn't all become depressed in the 2010s and 2020s. It was something that hit Gen Z and a little bit the later millennials. The millennial generation was born between 1981 and 1995. And whenever we look at anxiety or depression, we always find a sex difference. Teenage girls have higher rates of internalizing disorders, anxiety and depression primarily, and whatever it is that happened in the early 2010s, it hits girls harder than boys. As you can see in this graph, rates of depression rise very sharply in the early 2010s for girls. There's a real elbow, kind of a hockey stick shape. Boys are up a lot too. I don't want to make it sound like this is only hitting girls, but boys start at a lower level. So the increase among boys is not quite as dramatic. Among girls, around a quarter to a third are having anxiety issues or depression. And we can also see in this graph that COVID was really just a blip. Yes, it made things worse, but the rise was baked in. The rise was happening rapidly since around 2012. This is not caused by COVID. Now, some people say, oh, come on, this is all self-report data. Gen Z is just more comfortable talking about mental illness, and that's good, that would be healthy. But if that were the case, then we would not see the same pattern, the same sudden increases in behavior that was not self-reported. But we do. This graph plots the number out of 100,000 American teens ages 10 to 14 who visited emergency rooms for self-harm, mostly cutting and sometimes overdosing on their psychiatric medications. As you can see, no trend before 2010, and then the rate just explodes, at least for girls. And tragically, we find the same basic pattern when we look at suicide, especially when we look at 10 to 14-year-olds. What we see is that the rate is way up for both girls and for boys, and this really begins in the early 2010s. In fact, there was a 67% increase just from 2012 to 2013. So this trend shows up in behavior. It's not limited to what teens are saying about themselves. And it's not just us. This is what really shocked me. This is what made me change my research. I was all set to write a book on what social media is doing to democracy. I was gonna just talk about what it's doing to teens in America in the first chapter. But as I was writing that chapter, and I collected all the data from all these other countries, I realized, wait a second, this isn't just an American thing. Something is happening to kids around the world, or at least around the developed world, where we have good data. We find the same sorts of patterns in the UK, in Canada, Australia, New Zealand. This graph shows the astonishing rise in self-harm rates for British kids, British girls in particular, deduced not from self-report, but from doctors' records. We see the same thing, a sharp, sudden upturn. So that's what's happening to rates of mental illness in many countries around the world. Now, why is this happening? So we have a global mystery. Since the
So that's where I decided to cut it. It's a lot of data, a lot of heavy data. And you know, we always are taught, you know, and teach the kids, question the data, like what is behind it? And when you see that it's not just here, it's everywhere, and in the time periods, it was very eye-opening to me. And at the beginning of this is when I first started my counseling career, and so I've been able to see this increase, and it's only gotten, you know, more as the years have gone on. So, what parts of the rewiring feel the most surprising or hardest to believe? Did anybody hear anything that really stood out to them that they couldn't? Or is this all the stuff that you guys kind of already knew?
The self-harm for teenage girls, that was alarming to me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Self-harm was, I feel like the trend is kind of starting to go down, but self-harm was a huge trend for quite a few years, especially. I would say when I was in the public school my first couple of years as a counselor, I worked in middle school, I probably had at least 2 to 3 girls report self-harming a month. So like I was dealing with almost once a week with someone coming forward and saying that they were self-harming. So it was a big trend. I do not see that here at all, you know, but it is a trend that is still out there. So one of the quotes that is repeated a lot in the book is we overprotect our children and adolescents in the real world and underprotect them in the virtual world. Do you agree with that statement? Yeah. Yeah. Anyone like to participate? Yes.
So I see that a lot actually on play dates because I give my son as much freedom as I can within reason, as long as he's safe. But I do see that sometimes on play dates, a lot of parents are trying to almost overprotect their kids. It gets really hard because you want them to be free and experiment and learn and fall down and get back up. And they don't let them. And sometimes play dates become really constricted because I'm trying to let them be free and burn off some energy safely. And it doesn't really happen because there's a lot of micromanaging going on, and you're just like, I didn't go. That you know what I mean?
Absolutely, and those are like the life skills that we all learned out in the world when we were playing, right? We were in the neighborhood. There weren't parents hovering over us. That's how we grew up, most of us.
Yeah.
You know, and now we have the kids inside. It's safer inside. No one can snatch you if you're inside, right?
Yeah.
But the thing is just like that. The scary people are also in our houses too, right?
Yeah.
They're on Roblox, they're on these devices, and they figure out ways to get to the kids, right? So we've almost done the opposite, where now they're scared to be outside when a lot of the dangers is, right in their fingertips. And so we're going to be talking a lot about the different things, that, and a lot of differences from when we grew up to what our kids. Think back to your own childhood. Could your child have a similar experience? I recently found out that my public school, the lower elementary school is kindergarten, preschool through 3rd grade. And in order for the kids to get off the bus, they have to have a person there to get them. And I was reflecting on my own childhood. When I was in 2nd grade, I got off the bus myself and walked in, and my brother, who was in middle school, was responsible for me, and there was no parent at home. And he didn't come to meet me at the bus. And well, now that I'm a mom, I'm like, of course someone should get the child off the bus. That's like ludicrous. But like, I grew up, that was me. I walked myself home. I let myself in. And by 3rd grade, I was cooking mac and cheese on the stove. I would not let my 4th grader anywhere near fire right now, right? But like, it was a different time. And so when you kind of think about the things that we grew up doing, and then, but why is it so different? How is it so different? Right? Like, if anything, we have Ring doorbells and all that kind of stuff. We have a lot of cameras now. So if anything, it's safer outside for our kids, right, than it was when we were growing up. So it's just kind of something I catch myself doing when I'm thinking about a parenting decision. I'll think about my childhood and like, is that something I want my son to be able to experience? One of the things, we live very close to White Oak Park. We're in Branchbury, if you know the town. And so we're like maybe a quarter mile. And this year, he's been able to go to the park by himself. He does not have a cell phone, a device, anything. He goes with a watch, and he's told what time to be home, and he knows that there's going to be consequences, if he's not. And sometimes he's with a friend, sometimes he just goes to find friends. And that was so scary for me at the beginning. But now, it's I realized it was my own anxiety, not my son's anxiety. Right? He wanted to go play with his friends. He wasn't thinking that something could happen, right? I'm the one thinking like, oh, what if you don't stop and there's a car and all the scary things that us adults know, right? But kids don't know that. So when we're trying to protect them, sometimes we're giving our anxieties to them. So that was a big lesson that I took away from this. All right, back to the book.
The early 2010s, young people across the developed world are becoming more anxious, depressed, and lonely, more likely to harm and kill themselves, less educated, less able to focus, hence functionally less intelligent. Why is this happening? There's only one theory on the table, and no one's even proposed an alternative theory that can explain why it happened internationally. And that theory is the Great Rewiring Theory, which is that we lost the play-based childhood gradually, and then we gave our kids a phone-based childhood rather suddenly. You can see the loss of the play-based childhood with this simple demonstration. If you're doing this in a large group, I hope you'll try it right there in the room. At what age were you let out? At what age could you go out the front door, get on your bicycle, go to a friend's house, you and your friend go hang out, you get candy, ice cream, whatever. And if this was you in 1st grade, then your answer is 6. You were 6 years old. If you didn't get that freedom until, say, 7th grade, then your answer would be 12. So think of your number, and now answer by generation if you're in a group. So first, just people who were born before 1980. If you're 1980 and earlier, then you're Gen X or Baby Boom.
All right, so I'm gonna actually pause it here. Just curious.
Now limit the answers just.
I'm curious for you guys, and you don't have to identify with the generation if you don't want to, but in general, raise your hand if you were able to walk alone, go to a friend's house, like those kind of things, when you were 6 years old. Almost everybody. 8 years old?
I was 5.
3rd grade? Yeah, 5, younger? Right? Do anybody want to let their 6-year-olds now go? Yeah, right. And it also depends where you live, of course, but it's just another kind of reflection of how it is, right? And what's in the expectations that we have.
So people in the room who were born in 1996 or later, and what we find when I do this, I've done this all over the country and many other countries, is that 6 to 8 is when kids always got freedom. Kids were always out playing. by the time they were 8 years old. But now let's limit the answers only to Gen Z. Here's what you find. You find they generally didn't get freedom until they were 10 to 12 years old, until middle school. So we've delayed the onset of freedom by several years, and this has happened in many other countries as well. But just as we were locking up our kids, just as we were making them stay indoors, just as we were getting really afraid of the outer world and all the possibilities of bad things that could happen to them, at the same time, in the 1990s, the internet comes in. And at first, it's amazing. It's incredible. It's like God came down and said, do you want omniscience? Do you want to be able to know anything instantly? So we all loved it, and we thought that it would be good for our kids. And it kind of was, because the millennials, born 1981 through 1995, they grew up with the early internet, and they did fine. A creative generation, they started all kinds of companies. So we thought that this was going to be okay. But as you can see in this graph, the first wave of the internet came in the 1980s and 90s. It's the personal computer plus dial-up internet originally. That's what the millennials grew up on. But there's a second wave, which was very, very different. That is, when we start getting social media, beginning in 2003, we get MySpace and Friendster and Facebook. That catches on like wildfire, and when it gets combined with the iPhone, which comes out in 2007, now you've got the possibility of being on social media many, many hours a day. It's that second wave that seems to have caused the problem. Because once the kids are on a smartphone with social media loaded onto it, such as Instagram, that's exactly when the mental health crisis begins. I can illustrate the great rewiring in another way. Suppose you were born in 1995. You're the last year of the millennials. In the year 2010, you're 15 years old. So you're halfway through puberty, you're through early puberty, and your life was lived on a flip phone. You had a flip phone that had no front-facing camera, no internet access, no high-speed data, no social media. But suppose you were born instead, suppose you were born in the year 2000, just 5 years later. So you're turning 15 in the year 2015. What happened to you? Your first phone was probably a smartphone. It's around 2012 that most Americans now have gotten rid of the flip phones, bought smartphones. So you went through puberty on a smartphone with a front-facing camera, introduced in 2010. If you're a girl, you're probably on Instagram, which became very popular in 2012. You probably have a high-speed data plan, so you could be watching videos and sending photos all day long. And I can illustrate the great rewiring in yet another way. Here's some images of what childhood used to be like. It was outdoors, there were adventures, there was some risk. And those of you who are a little older, you remember in the 1980s, if you found an extraterrestrial creature by the roadside, you could just pick him up and put it in your basket and have adventures with your friends. By 2015, childhood has become very solitary. In fact, if you're a boy, you can't go over to your friend's house to play. If you go to his house, how are you going to play video games? You have to go home where you have your headset, your screen, your avatar, and then you can play multiplayer video games. And of course, if you're a girl, everything's happening on Instagram and a few other platforms. So again, childhood has become much more solitary, much more lonely. And I can illustrate the great rewiring in yet another way by showing you data on how Americans spend their time. There are long-running surveys that have tracked how many minutes people spend doing all kinds of activities, one of which is hanging out with your friends outside of work and school. What you see in this graph is that young people, age 15 to 24, used to spend a lot of time with their friends. Older people are married, they've got a job, they're not hanging out with their friends. But young people, of course, they're hanging out with their friends until they get their first smartphone. Once they get an iPhone, time with friends plummets. And as you can see here, it drops and drops and drops. The last point on this line is 2020, during the height of COVID lockdowns, May of 2020. The point before it is 2019. For the older generations, you can see how COVID lockdowns decreased their time. You can see a bend in the lines. It decreased their time with friends. But you don't even see that bend for Gen Z, because they began social distancing as soon as they got smartphones. And even when they're with their friends, they're often just looking at their phones. And it starts way before adolescence. We are stuffing devices into kids' hands. As I said, 40% of our 2-year-olds have their own iPad. Here you see a little video a father put up on TikTok. He was so proud of his son, how quickly he can engage in these various activities. But just imagine his brain growing. Imagine those roots growing on a boy who has this level of stimulation many hours of every day from the time he's 2 to the time he's 18. It's going to change things. We've also all discovered that if we simply give our kid our phone, we can then do the adult things that we need to do. So in the anxious generation, I focused on the mental illness, on those harms, but there are so many others. I have a whole chapter, chapter 5, listing 4 foundational harms that are happening to boys and girls. So the first is social deprivation, which I just talked about. Kids aren't hanging out with their friends nearly as much as they used to. Second is sleep deprivation. When a kid has access to a device at night, many of them are addicted. They're going to be using it under the covers. They're going to be staying up late. They're going to be caught up in the drama. They sleep less since 2010. The third is attention fragmentation. These devices are constantly interrupting our kids, making it harder for them to think, harder for them to think through a problem, harder for them to read a book. And the final one is behavioral addiction. These devices and apps are designed to hook children. They are designed to stimulate the child with exactly the trigger that will keep them on, and between 2 and 10% develop something that sure looks like addictions. Compulsive use, if you take the device away, they're going to be anxious and irritated and just very unhappy. But there's so much more happening to girls. I had to have a whole chapter, chapter 6, just to go through all the different kinds of harms that are happening to girls who are heavy users of social media. The chronic social comparison, the perfectionism, the different kinds of aggression that happen between girls on social media. Girls are under relentless pressure to look amazing, and these platforms offer them all kinds of editing tools to look like something that they're not. For all these reasons, time on social media is particularly hard on girls. Now let's talk about attention fragmentation.
So, lot of data, and we know for a while now that social media has a huge impact on girls and their body image and their comparisons, the haves, the have-nots, the photoshopping, and what we call anticipatory anxiety, which is where you post something and you wait for the likes, and oh my gosh, nobody's liking it, now like they must not like me, and all these things. And then we have the drama that goes along with the comments or the group chats or the things like that then come into school, and then we have drama, in that way. And, time and time again with the boys, I hear them talking about, oh, I was up till 3 a.m. playing, game last night, blah, 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 blah. And I'm thinking to myself, it's Wednesday, why are you up till 3 o'clock? And they do. And it's so important that your kids don't have video games in their rooms and devices in their rooms because they need to go to sleep. And that they're not using their devices before they go to bed because that light affects them. It affects all of us. I mean, all these things are for us too, not just for our kids. And we're gonna get to that a little bit too. And the piece about the quick videos, we're seeing a lot in the classrooms now because these kids want everything to be quick and they want these little quick lessons, quick things, and that's not life. You got to work at things. You have to take time and build that gumption to be able to do things and fail and be able to pick those pieces up again. And when you're on these things, it's like this quick, they don't have time to kind of sit in that failure either. So let's see, what's the question? Come on. There we go. So one of the things that he points out is the trade-off of less freedom offline and more freedom online. We kind of talked about the video games and things like that. I'm actually going to skip to the next one because I feel like we kind of did that one. But what parts of modern life make it hard to break these patterns? In the book, or in the book and in the video, it mentions when you want to get something done, or when you want your kids to be quiet, here, and as I said, it's a judgment-free zone, but it's in car line, you see it has the little ones waiting for the big ones to get picked up. They're on the tablet, right? And in the sporting events, I see this all the time at I go to my son's games, and the siblings are on the sidelines with an iPad. And I'm thinking, there's other kids you could play with, we're out in nature, why is that even an option, right? And as much as you try not to judge, it's almost getting to the point where anytime a kid says, "Can I have my device?" we're just handing it over, because it's almost becoming natural for us to do that. In the grocery store, you know, when you see the little babies with the iPad, and again, they're just little, and they're sitting there in the grocery cart with the iPad, and you know, grocery stores is a great place for little ones to learn facial recognition and how to smile and how to wave and all those kinds of things. So when you have a baby that's looking down at a device, they're missing all those social cues. And then eventually they go to the preschool and they're almost behind in that area and they don't understand. And especially with like a lot of the cartoons and things, you can't learn social cues from a minion. They don't have social cues, right? Like so we're having these 2-year-olds that are sitting here watching these little guys, and that's what they're mimicking. And it's okay to an extent, but it's almost getting to the point where it's a lot. And so to kind of reflect on when does our child, you know, need that to opposed to when it's like convenient for us, it's easier for us. Any comments? Questions?
I was going to say, in terms of modern life and getting the kids to play, I think versus like when we were kids, it's a lot harder to just go out in the neighborhood and find other kids for whatever reason.
Yeah.
Now you have to like go distances to like create play dates, and you can't just for whatever reason, like the neighborhoods now are not conducive to just kids getting together with people in their own age group.
Yeah.
So you got to work at it.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay.
Also, with the parts of modern life is changing the work culture. When so many of us grew up with parents or whatever, you know, we had the 9 to 5, or even if you worked really hard, okay, you're gone in the morning, you're gone and you come back at night, there's still that time that you're not at work.
Yes.
And now we're expected to answer emails and answer phone calls and do something, so that not even like the, you know, cooking dinner or something else where it's just a convenience. I really have something I need to concentrate on, so I can't have a screaming child doing something else or anything else, I feel like, because I have an obligation there as well. And I think that also affects us, and our kids mimic what we do. So if we're consistently on it, you know, for a good reason, that's what they think too.
Yes, absolutely.
I'm not a parent, but I could see with other parents, I keep hearing them say, like they're losing control.
Yeah.
Like before, you know, preschool, you had more control of your family and your children of what you saw, and it's like, okay, at such and such an age, this is appropriate for me to speak to.
Yes.
But now that's being kind of taken away, so I think modern life, with all the many inputs coming in, I think can lose control. Yeah, so I think it's almost as if you can do certain things, but if the child goes to see friends and they can play any game they want,
Yes.
Grand Theft Auto or whatever at age 7, then I'm not judging, but I'm just saying that you're more mature.
Absolutely.
So I think that's a big part of it.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen it in myself, like, the amount of things I actually depend on this, rather than, like, when I was growing up, I had a planner.
Yeah.
You know, and we all had a planner in elementary school, middle school, and things like that, and I depended on that planner. And now I can't even remember my best friend's phone number.
Yeah.
You know, I wouldn't understand my best friend's phone number, their address, like, all these different things, and there was like this process in my head. And now if I have to think about it, I'm like, no, I need to actually, even with the immediacy of this, like, you know, checklists,
Yes.
and, you know, so it's like, so there's an immediacy that I'm almost relying on this now, where my brain isn't wired anymore in a way to retain that information.
Absolutely, absolutely. There's going to be a little bit more on this later, but one of the things that I try to be more mindful about my own technology, and I used to like, you know, my son's watching some show I don't really want to watch, right? So I'm sitting next to him, I'm spending time with him because I'm next to him, but I'm scrolling on my phone while he's watching a show. And then I kind of realized, you know what, like, that's the example that I'm setting, right? So now I'm very mindful that when I'm sitting with him, we're watching the show together, we're having dialogue on it. I'm not present, I'm having presence, right? And that's a totally different thing. And that's you know, yes, we can stop and we can answer an email, but are we answering emails or are we scrolling through socials? Because we do that too, right? So, it's that kind of thing too. All right.
My daughter actually, I just think my daughter actually yelled at me the other day because we were watching TV and I was watching the show with her,
and then my phone went off.
Mhm.
She goes, Daddy, you're on your phone, get off.
Yeah,
And
right,
she set
right.
me straight, yeah.
Absolutely, and that's great, because, you know, the days are long, the years are short. We only have a little bit of time with our kids, and if they see us, like, that's what is important to us, that's what's gonna be important to them, right? And so, and that's kind of what this book really just kept, you know, pounding home and really helping me to really reflect on and be mindful of my own use.
In 2015, Martin Weigel invented the term attention fracking. Fracking is a way that was discovered to extract oil from the ground that was previously inaccessible. You break up the rocks, you pump it full of water, you pump out the oil. And in the same way, social media companies found that if they can crack up your attention, interrupt you, get little bits of time from you, they can suck out a lot more attention and sell it to advertisers. Research shows that our kids are being constantly interrupted. One study found that the average was 237 notifications per day, with many kids over 1,000 notifications per day. Social media that is short videos is perhaps the most powerful way of fragmenting attention. In fact, TikTok knows exactly what it's doing. On my Substack, After Babel, you can find an article that is composed mostly of TikTok's own words. These are quotations that are in some of the lawsuits when attorneys general are suing these companies and they're able to find reports from inside the company. We know what they're saying based on their own internal studies and findings. Here's a quote from TikTok employees. Compulsive usage correlates with a slew of negative mental health effects like loss of analytical skills, memory formation, contextual thinking, conversational depth, empathy, and increased anxiety. In addition to interfering with essential personal responsibilities like sufficient sleep, work-school responsibilities, and connecting with loved ones. TikTok is fragmenting and fracturing attention and drawing it out to sell it. The net effect is that our kids are learning less and they know less. In 2023, Derek Thompson had a very powerful article in The Atlantic where he looked at long-term trends in educational outcomes. What you can see here is that from the 1970s through 2012, America made slow but steady progress in improving the educational outcomes of its kids. But then this happens. After 2012, the numbers go down. And the 2024 results just came out. Many people had been expecting that it was COVID. Therefore, as we get past COVID, kids will recover, they'll respond, the scores will rise. But it's not happening. What we see instead is that the top students, those in the top quarter, are doing about the same or a little bit worse. But those in the bottom quarter are doing much worse. We see this in many data sets. Whenever you break it up by high versus low, whatever is happening, it's hurting the students at the bottom much more than the students at the top. And it's not just us. This graph shows data from PISA, the one global survey we have of education. And as you can see, as in so many other graphs I've shown you, no trend before 2010 or 2012. And after 2012, we get drops around the world. So that's what we know about attention fragmentation and educational declines.
So we kind of already talked about the quick videos being a thing, but I was at recess, doing recess duty, and I had a first grader that was, and again, no judgment, re-listen, we don't judge, who was like talking about a TikTok. And she's like, oh, this, I saw it on the TikTok, this is how you do the TikTok dance. And she's doing the TikTok dance, and she's like trying, Miss Severson, learn the TikTok dance. And I'm like, you know, it's one of those things, and it's adorable, right? It's cute, but at the same time, I'm thinking like, I'm sure it's just that one video. I hope it's just that one video that, you know, she's learning the dance from. But I'm thinking, I hope first graders aren't really on TikTok that much, right? But then you hear going up, you know, the older kids that are on it, and there's a lot out there, right? And it's these quick videos, and that attention fragmenting is really impacting education a lot.
Excuse me.
Because they have trouble. Yeah.
Well, I was listening to that. I work for a wedding company.
Okay.
And we do videos for weddings. About 20 years ago, our biggest selling video edit was a full-length wedding video, which was anywhere from half an hour to an hour, depending. About 10 years ago, highlight videos became very popular. which were about 5 minutes. 2 weeks ago, we had a meeting where now brides want a 1-minute video
Wow.
because, and they want it within a week because they can post it on social media. So, I mean, just about every 10 years, it's gotten shorter and shorter, and now they want it within a week too, because I'm not
It's gotta be
going.
quick, right?
Yes, I gotta get up so I can impress my friends and show them
It's
how
that
wonderful.
anticipatory anxiety, they want those likes.
It's crazy.
Yeah, actually, like, Paula would say touched on it, but yeah, it's like a fact as humans, we went from remembering like 7 digits plus or minus 2 to 4 plus or minus 2. It's because of the phones. But I do have a question.
Yes.
Is there anything that they discuss in regards to like watching a television versus like physically
We do.
holding a tablet, or like
Yes.
certain shows like Wildcraft or something like that that's more educational versus like Coco Melon that's like a lot of stimulation and stuff like that?
Well, they don't in the book, and we're actually, there is a part in the video coming up too where they will talk about the difference between the screen, like iPad stuff, opposed to TV.
Okay.
Not so much different shows on TV. But I agree with that. You know, just in my own research, in my own background, you know, you want your child to be exposed to language. You don't want them to be exposed to the Coco Melon little annoying kind of thing. I mean, they're the cutesy shows, right? We need them. But even like Mickey Mouse. Mickey Mouse can be cute and learn your ABCs and 1, 2, 3s, right? And so those kinds of things, right? So we want to make sure that they are, if they're watching screens, it's worth it. Right? Wildcraft is a great show. Daniel Tiger, right? Shows that can teach them something, not just colors and flashing things. Yes.
It almost seems, regardless of the show, right, that when you're watching, or a child or adult is watching TV, there's an end to the show, there's an end to the movie, whereas when you're on the screen, or you have the accessibility to a phone, tablet, what have you, there's no end, it's endless.
Yes.
So what is the expectation there?
Right. And then it's wrestling it away from the child. It's like one more.
There's no, and then what, we're putting time limits on the tablet, oh, but I didn't, it just, there's no fulfillment when it comes to that endless type of rat hole that you fall into.
Yeah, you need that conclusion, right? You need the story to end. Yes, absolutely.
I was gonna say, in the book, he mentioned that the best screen time is watching a movie where the beginning, middle, and end is some sort of moral arc with other people so that you're laughing together and it's more of a social experience.
Absolutely, yeah. So we're going to be talking a little bit about that too. I mean, we definitely see how technology affects our students' focus in school. We're going to get into a little bit of the school stuff. I will say we have great practices here, and the one thing that we've gotten away from, particularly this year, is using screens in the morning. Because when you start your day on a screen, it's hard to get those kids back and focused again. So that has become something that we've changed as a school. We don't want our kids coming in, you know, in homeroom and going right to their tablets. Like that's not good for their brains. It's not good, and because we were seeing these behaviors, and as soon as you take that thing away, it's like we got normal kids again. And so, you know, it's amazing, and we do see that. So it's that attention, it's the quick. And we kind of already talked a little bit before too about how our families can model healthier attention. But you know, that's the one thing I am asking, you know, as you guys are going through this, kind of thinking like, how do you handle your own social media and time on the phone, and because you are modeling that for your child, right? So so just to kind of think about that healthier habits as well. What kind of like problems do you guys have already with these things that you're seeing in your own lives? Yes.
I know, like, we don't do many screens, but I know specifically with my younger daughter, whenever there is like a video or something, and it was like similar to what you were saying, like when it's time, like, okay, we can watch one thing, or that it's like the end of the world when it's taken away. It's like it sucks them in so much. It's like, why are you so obsessed with this? Like that you're having this, you know, full-on
tantrum
meltdown. Yeah, like I just, you know, threw your favorite toy in the garbage or something.
Yeah, at school we have a say, me too, like when we like say like, oh, that's my experience too. And that's why community is so important, because I feel like so many parents can follow that, you know, and be like, oh yeah, I know when I take my kids' iPad away, like that's why we give it to them, because it keeps them quiet, and then we take it away and they're a hot mess. And that's what we want to avoid, right? And so we kind of all have those moments, and sometimes we don't even realize that it's the screen that's causing them to be like that, right? So we just think like it's something else. It's because they don't want to go to soccer, but really it's because you're letting on the screen before soccer. Yeah.
I will say that I switched to only VHS and only DVDs in my house.
Yeah.
And like, that's the option, you don't get to pick what you like, you can pick through the DVDs or VHSs,
Yeah.
but like, that's it. And like, it's cool too, cause like a lot of local libraries, you can go and be like, okay, let's check out some new DVDs.
Absolutely.
And they love that, but it's also like, it really just for them, it's not this issue.
Yes.
It's like, hey, like after this one, like we're done. And it's like, okay. Or like half the
Absolutely.
time they won't even go back up and put another one in. It's just
Absolutely.
okay.
Yeah, it's like the good old days.
So one thing that as we get older and so on, we start to learn different things that you just take for granted, right? Like, I remember when I was a student, or not a student, I was a chaplain at Rutgers, right? Like, students would send me a text message, right? Like, hey, Father Keith, can we meet, blah, blah, blah. And I had a rule of it all, like, more than like 2 texts, just call, right? Which is like, no one does it. But they would say, hey, Father Keith, you know, I really need to talk, can we meet tomorrow at like 2 o'clock? And I'd respond, sure. The next day, I was like, why are you mad at me? Because for them, like, one word answers is not, I mean, now it's probably changed again. But one of the things, we were just at the youth group, and we were talking about, you know, Instagram and so on, and you know, what if you don't like it? And they said, and these high school students are all good kids and everything else, they said, yeah, if you don't like somebody's post on Instagram, you're not their friend. You have to like every single post. And so that anxiety that comes up, I need to be connected all the time, because I'm gonna get yelled at, I'm not gonna be a good friend.
Yeah.
Because that's how they, you know, it's a dangerous thing.
And that drama comes into my office. Or, you know, on vacation, I know I had a family friend who was going on a cruise, and their kid, like, they had to buy some expensive internet package on the cruise because their kid had a streak, right? And they couldn't break the snap. So here this parent is paying like, you know, $40 at whatever it is a day on this like beautiful vacation, so their kid can have a snap streak. What? Like, you know, and sometimes I think like parents, like, what's going on? You know what I mean? Yes. Sorry.
So, I read this book 3 times. For 3 different reasons.
Yeah.
So I came to this book completely unrelated, related to my job. We were trying to delve into why jurors act a certain way, what causes them to do certain things, think certain ways. And in reading it, it was so informative for parenting that I reread it again. And then my son was much younger. Now he's getting to the age where kids are getting phones and stuff like this, so now I read it again. And every time I read it, I'm fascinated by it. I mean, there's this pretty heady stuff, but if you read the book, it is presented in such a way that you're fascinated by the book. I couldn't put the book down. I really could not put the book down. It's so well written, and the scenarios are so on point and so appropriate. It could not be better. And one of the things that's the most interesting is really coming back to this thought, you know, this is the largest uncontrolled experiment humanity has ever performed on its children, period. And so back to, again, how work led me to this, you know, I've done a lot of work in this area in California on the algorithms that these groups put together to suck your kids in. This isn't an accident.
Yeah.
They're not accidentally becoming hooked on it. They're not accidentally kind of like, oh, I like it, so I'm gonna do it. It's a literal algorithm that's designed to hook your children into the internet. And they can't get off it. It's designed not to get them off it. It's designed to hook them and loop them and streak them and like them and dislike them to the point where they cannot get off it.
Right.
Sounds like the tobacco companies.
It absolutely is.
That's
One of the
what
same.
I'm saying.
One and the same. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Somebody, yeah, we're all
Guilty as the kids.
Right.
Yes, absolutely. All right, let me just go on to the next section, because he does talk about.
Now let's talk about boys. Here I drew on a wonderful book by my friend Richard Reeves. The book is called Of Boys and Men. If you have sons, I urge you to buy this book. The story for boys wasn't quite as clear as it was for girls. It took us longer to figure it out, but drawing on Richard's work, we can see that boys and men have been retreating from the real world since the 1970s. They're doing worse compared to girls in occupational outcomes and especially in education. School is becoming increasingly less welcoming to boys. We get rid of recess, shop class, a lot of the things that boys really would enjoy more. And we replace it with just more time sitting in a chair trying to learn. As boys are withdrawing their efforts from school, the virtual world has gotten more and more amazing since the 1970s. The video games get better and better. The porn gets more gripping. So boys found themselves not enjoying school, but really putting a lot of time into their virtual lives. And what happens is then they miss out on all the real world adventures, the things that will toughen them and strengthen them and teach them to deal with risk. All of that goes out the window because they're sitting somewhat motionless for so many hours a day. The way I've come to think about this is that there are dozens or hundreds of companies that are fishing for boys. They're doing everything they can to hook boys by giving them quick dopamine. Dopamine is the neurotransmitter that is released when we are making progress towards a goal. They've found ways to engage boys in the virtual world, give them a little flash of pleasure, and that hooks them, that makes them want more and more and more. It starts with the video games, these amazing video games that are tailor-made to keep them playing and playing and playing. Then it moves on to porn, which any kid can access just by going to a website and lying about their age. It goes on to vaping and e-cigarettes, messing with nicotine, which again is dopamine. It continues on when they're older to sports betting, gambling, and then crypto and stock market betting. All of these things have been gamified in ways that are drawing boys in, harming their ability to focus, addicting them to these activities, and by the end, bankrupting a lot of them. The bottom line is that young men are floundering compared to girls. We see that in this graph. Many more of them are living at home with their parents, not when they're just out of college. We're talking about late 20s and early 30s.
So, as a counselor, as I said, a lot of information about girls. There's always information about girls, but it's hard to get data on boys for whatever reason, probably because they don't seek out counseling in the same way. But as a boy mom, this is kind of eye-opening for me as well. Either way, sleepovers, right? Kids are bringing their devices, and if your kid doesn't have one, what are they looking at? Like, what if your child is exposed to something that it makes them feel uncomfortable and they don't understand because somebody who is allowed on their phone brings their phone to the sleepover and look at what I saw, look at this. And then it becomes, well, that's confusing, what does this mean? These are new feelings or whatever it is. And with the boys, the violence that some of them see as well. I'm gonna get a little dark here for a second. I have a friend of mine who, he has a 7th grade daughter, and him and his wife keep going back and forth about the cell phone, and she's kind of getting, she's the wife's kind of going with the daughter now. I don't want her to be on the outside. I want her to have friends. Her friends are excluding her because she's not on the socials. I get it. And then the daughter comes home the day of the Charlie Kirk assassination and said, Mom and Dad, these kids, they saw this guy get shot. Her classmates, they were watching this happen. And the father says to his daughter, and that is why you don't have social media. I know that there are students in our school who saw that on their Instagrams, on their TikToks. And that is just insane, right? And again, but it's in that algorithm. It was everywhere. And those kids don't know how to process that. Adults don't know how to process that, right? And that's just one thing, and then there's the porn, and then there's the gambling, and then there's all these other things. And we're trying to raise these men who are being exposed to these things and can't maybe separate what's reality, right? And then there's also this incident that's happening where they're not even trying. There's a lot of, I think the video gets into a little bit, this age group in their 20s, early 30s right now who are just staying with mom and dad, and they have no motivation to leave. They're just like, they're comfortable and they're just there, right? And it's because they don't have like this confidence, because these expectations have been put up here, right? Of what they've been viewing, what they've been seeing. So it was refreshing to kind of see a little bit of research that on the boys, but now it's something to kind of think about too. When, you know, how do boys, if you guys have, you know, sons and daughters, like, do you see differences in how your daughter plays with or is on a screen opposed to your son? Do you see any differences on that?
Yeah.
No. Yeah.
I definitely do. My son, if he does have a screen in front of him, it is all sports, right? And it's all of these different kids who are his age promoting themselves, or, you know, his parents are promoting him on social media as this, you know, amazing sports player, right? And then my son will compare himself. And, well, if, you know, Joe Schmo can do it, how come you're not putting me on YouTube? How come you're not, you know, showing what I can do with hockey? Well, because you're 9 and you're my son, and I'm not gonna put you out on social media, but he's still comparing himself. And this level of success that he thinks these other children are having is maybe not even necessarily reality. My daughter, on the other hand, will find anything related to Barbie, right? But even that, Barbie's having a baby. And do I want to explain Barbie having a baby? No, God gives us babies as far as my children are concerned. We don't need to talk about what goes into that at 5 years old.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So there are different avenues that I have found, and so my husband and I are very much aligned on no YouTube.
Yep.
No YouTube, no YouTube.
No YouTube.
Because that's what we have found with both our son and our daughter. There are questions that we're not prepared. I shouldn't even say prepared. We don't want to answer, right? You're 5 years old. You're a 5-year-old little girl. We don't want to talk about how Barbie's pushing out a baby. Not your business, right? And for my son, you know, from his perspective, he shouldn't have to compare himself with somebody who's in the best baseball uniform who even knows who he plays for. It's social media. So I do definitely see differences, but the similarity is nothing positive is coming from that outlet.
Yes. Yes, YouTube, you know, has a lot of great educational things out there, but I am also no judgment, a YouTube free family, because of that. And even, the other day I was watching this show on Netflix, Is It Cake? And it's supposed to be just a show about whether or not it's cake or it's a real object, right? It's supposed to be fun, right? I'm sitting there watching it with my son, and he loved this show. And then one of the contestants, it cuts to what he does in his personal life, and he does drag in his personal life.
Yeah.
So then my son pauses the television and says, Mom, what is he doing? Like so confused. And so now I'm sitting here, instead of watching a show about cake, it's a cake, it's not cake. And he's like, but like, I'm like, oh, you know, and so now I'm having to have a conversation about drag, and I didn't really want to, because he's 9, right? And so like, but the thing I'm happy about is I was there in that moment, because if I was scrolling on my phone, or I was going to do something else and he had questions, and he asked somebody else, I'm scared of what that answer would have been. If he asked somebody that was like, oh, well, gender is fluid and you can be anything you want to be, right? I would be a little upset at that. Like, I want to be able to handle it. So that is also the great benefit of knowing what your child is watching, because they will come to school and they will ask their friends to explain something to them. And we have had that situation too, and it's a tough one, right? So being aware of the content, because if your child's up in their bedroom on YouTube, you don't know what they're watching. Right? You can have all the blocks in the world and things still get through, because is it cake? Should it have that? No, it doesn't. But like, here we are. So online life and the gaming, you know, I think that's how boys are friends. That's how they hang out together. They get on the headsets and they talk to each other, and that's how they socialize. So it's very interesting, because it's solo socialization. Whereas back in the day, I remember, you know, some of the N64, it'd be like 4 remotes, right? They'd be on one couch, and that's how you play video games. But now it's very separate. So that it's a very solitary, or do we really want our boys sitting for hours at a time, maybe even in the dark, you know, playing shooting games, and just like that's normal for them because that's how they hang out with their friends. You know, so it's just something to kind of.
Well, I just have one comment on that.
You're behind.
Yeah, that's okay. The other day, my son was playing a game with a friend, and they were on a voice call at the same time. And he had asked me to ask the friend's mom a question about getting together a separate day. And then I heard they were on the call, and I said, well, you're on the call, and ask him. And he's like, I'm not asking him, what are you talking about? Like, he was on the call with the kids, but they weren't talking to each other. And he wouldn't ask him the question. Like, so I was like, what is that? That like, why even be on the call? You know, you can't ask your friend the question that you want me to then text his mom to ask. So, you know.
I've done that with my son. He's like, text our neighbor, and I'm like, go and knock on their door. Like, they're right next door, just go. And he's like, no, like, what if they're not home? Oh, then come home. Like, it's not that complicated, kid, right?
But
So,
to like already be on the call though, and to say that, I was like, no, that's not good.
right? It's because they don't want, it's that fear of rejection. Because what if he says no? What if he hesitates and he doesn't really want to hang out with me and he's not really my friend, and then like, I don't have a friend, I'm not a friend. Right? Whereas if he doesn't really want to hang out with me and he tells mom that, then mom's gonna like make up an excuse, and it'll let me down easier. Right? So it's that self-confidence too. And we have to watch that with our boys, because a lot of times they don't talk about not feeling confident. They don't talk about what's going on with them. They just kind of power through. All right, almost.
Now I want to talk to you about the most unusual chapter in The Anxious Generation. It's a chapter on spiritual degradation. The reason that I wrote it is because my first book, The Happiness Hypothesis, reviewed ancient wisdom from East and West, religious and philosophical traditions, and what they could teach us about how to live a flourishing life. And when I was almost done writing The Anxious Generation, I realized, wait, this whole book is about kids, but what about adults? Isn't something happening to all of us? Don't all of us feel somehow overwhelmed by all the technology, by social media, by all the stuff coming in? And I realized that the way that our phone-based lives are affecting us is almost exactly the opposite of what the ancients urged us to do. So the chapter goes through 7 principles, 7 ideas that are common among the world's wisdom traditions, and I show in each one a phone-based life makes us do the opposite. So just to take one example, stillness, silence, and focus. There's a wonderful book out recently by Christine Rosen called The Extinction of Experience. And she points out that with so much stuff coming in, many of my students are always bringing stuff in, they're always consuming, listening to podcasts, something's always coming in. They're never bored. And Rosen points out that a culture without boredom undermines the act of daydreaming, something interstitial time used to be given over to. The interstices, that refers to the little gaps between things, you know, like the time between 2 classes, or maybe you're waiting for an elevator. Our lives used to have moments when we weren't consuming something, we were thinking, we had time to reflect. All of those are gone for a lot of our kids, especially those who say that they are online almost constantly. They have given up all of their interstitial moments. Just imagine what that would be like. What would it be like if you never had stillness or silence? Think about all the times when you were a child, when perhaps you looked out the window on a long car ride and just got lost in thought. Think about all the times when you just looked up at the sky and daydreamed, thought about things. Imagine all of that going away, as it has for some of our kids. This is the opposite of what the ancients have urged us to do, to meditate, to calm our minds, to be open to the finer energies of the universe or of other people. To take another example, so many wisdom traditions urge us to be slower to anger, quicker to forgive. Why do you complain about the speck in your neighbor's eye when you cannot see the plank in your own? But what does life online tell us to do? When our kids are growing up, when we as adults are on social media, the message is judge now, judge harshly, don't worry about context. Because if you don't judge now, someone's going to judge you for not judging. So again, a life online is pushing us away from the direction that the ancients urge us. Members of Gen Z are really eloquent about this. The older members, the ones in their 20s, they see what's going on. They understand what has happened to them. There's a really wonderful Gen Z poet named Corey Jane, and she has this amazing poem. It's a video poem, but she has a couple of lines in it that really show the spiritual degradation. As she says, "The phone is the medicine that is surely making our souls die." She says, "I know it's poison, but I drink it anyway." And she says, "Our parents were right, it was the damn phones." But don't take my word for it. Here is Corey reading the poem.
I think our parents were right, it was the damn phones. We laughed when we were children, hearing it's that Snapgram and InstaChat and FaceTalk. They didn't understand, they couldn't even say it right. I thought I knew better than them. They didn't know what it was like having worlds at the tip of our fingers. We scroll through the trash so much, we have headlines tattooed on our skin, wires for veins, AI for a brain, and they may not have understood that they were right, it is the damn phones. A drug in my pocket depended on stimulation, but can we blame us? We were but children when they were given. We didn't know how to stop it. If I added up all the hours I spent on a screen, existential dread and regret would creep in, so I ignored this fact by typing away. And it's not like I can throw away my phone. It's how we communicate, it's how we relate, it's the medicine that is surely making our souls die. I used to say I was born in the wrong generation, but I was mistaken, for do I not do everything I say I hate? When I look in the mirror, I see a ghost staring back. I try not to think too much about who I would be without technology. The character behind the phone screen has become self-aware. Almost worse than being naive, for I know it's poison, but I drink anyways. We used to be scared of robots gaining consciousness, a lie by the media companies to keep us distracted, as to not ourselves become conscious of the mess that they have created. We are the robots, we are the products, and so I sit and I scroll and I rot on repeat. Sit and scroll and rot until my own thoughts are what is being fed to me on TV, until my own feelings are wrapped in celebrities, until my body is but a tool of my political identity, and so I sit and I scroll and I rot. And so I post on the internet how the internet has failed us so that I do not fail my internet presence. I think our parents were right. It was the damn phones.
And once again, I can illustrate this with data. The saddest graph in the whole book is this one. There's a survey that's been given to high school seniors every year since the 1970s. One of the questions on it is, I feel that my life is not very useful. Do you agree with that? Do you disagree with it? And when we plot out the percentage of American high school seniors who agreed with it, it was always around 8 or 9%, very steady over many decades, until 2012. And then it goes shooting up and it basically doubles. Because once our kids adopted a phone-based childhood and they're just consuming content, in a sense their lives are not very useful. They're just the product in the attention economy. So here's yet another reason why our kids are in a deep spiritual crisis, and this, I think, has to be a contributor to the rise of suicide rates.
We are very lucky that we have spirituality, obviously, throughout our day, and I think that helps a lot. And I know that there's a lot out in the world right now. There's a huge revival, they say, happening, and people are getting in touch because for a long time, and we see this, in our masses, that a long time, people started getting away from the church. They started getting away from that. They started putting their energy into travel sports and things like that, and because that became the culture, right? It wasn't faith. It wasn't church. It was, well, I have to get my kid ahead. They have to play on the tournament teams. They have to go and they have to do this, and we have all these busy schedules, right? And church just kind of, we lost it. And then we have people who have this search for meaning and they don't understand why they can't find it. And so having spirituality is a huge thing, and it helps. And having that connection and rooted in something solid helps children so much, because if all their connections are virtual, right? That's how these mental health issues, and that's when if their self-worth is coming from a like button, how many hearts they have, then that's when we're in that scary territory, because it's not going to take much to push them over the edge, right? So we want to make sure that our kids have real life connections that we're talking, and that we have community, and that's what, again, I appreciate so much about Immaculate. Do you think that screens have changed the way that kids see themselves? Yeah. Right? All we do is compare. Well, she has this, like Christmas morning, everybody's showing off like what they got for Christmas. And then it's like, well, Santa bought this kid a PS5 and this kid got like, you know, a candy bar. I don't know, you know, like it's like very different things. Well, does Santa love you more? Well, it's not about that, right? But like back in the day, we didn't really know. We had to wait 2 weeks to find out what everybody got for Christmas, right? Like we didn't care, you know. And now it's right there. You know, the kids that get to go to Europe for their vacations, but like we, you know, my family just goes on the Jersey Shore, like you know, that's still really cool too. But like it's like these comparisons, right? And it's unrealistic and it's hard. And the only one we should be comparing ourselves to is Jesus. Like that's how we should be acting in our lives. And in what ways do you think that we can better prepare our kids to wisely navigate the real world? Anyone have any thoughts on this one? The real world, yes.
So I also feel like there's, you know, we also try to shield our kids from so much too that we're not actually talking to our kids about, like, just in general things. Like, I know, like, even just like a base thing, like, most kids have no idea even where their food comes from.
Yes.
They don't even understand, like, even like vegetables. Like, a lot of kids are like, oh, like, that grows from a tree? Or like, how does that, like, just like easy base things to like talk to your kids about, to like, just like have like, oh, like, cool, like, I don't know, like, I guess, I wanna say like common sense stuff, but like just starting to put that in there and like, just these conversations to like help them.
Absolutely.
To add to that note, I have a couple cousins in Gen Z, and I remember asking them, should I get my kids a phone? And he looked at me dead on, he paused, and he goes, it ruined my life. Now this kid had everything, he's smart, he now travels the world. And I asked him, I said, you've been to Australia, you've been to Asia, I'm telling you, this kid's got everything. I said, what inspired you? Thought about it, he goes, I don't know. Numb. Numb. Could not even connect. I mean, it's just baffling.
Absolutely.
Similarly, my nephew was a big hockey player and was being scouted by big names, went to a great college and whatnot, and New England, and got involved in gaming. And he got hooked. And that was it. He got hooked, a scholarship, lost everything that he had worked for his whole years coming up, and now he lives at home in Vermont and barely leaves his bedroom. He couldn't get off it. He couldn't get off gaming.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
I think the answer to the question really is to just have them be present in the real world. So we really just have to limit, and it does start with us as the parents. And even myself, I mean, I took a hiatus off of social media 2020 when COVID hit. And because I also too kind of felt this pressure of like having to like and comment on everything. It's like, how do you run a household and like and comment on everyone's things? I can't. And then it's like you're not supportive or whatever it is. So I was just like, I'm not on it, I don't follow anything, so you can't, I'm just not biased to anyone. And it's been so freeing to me, so I have more time to be present and just teaching them to be present.
Absolutely.
So even drives home from school, there's no music, there's no devices, it's just conversation going through the day. How did that make you feel? And then we go to the park. And then you go and you do another activity, and you literally just have them really try to just be in the world.
Absolutely, yeah. And I know it's hard on the long drives and things like that, but that's also, you know, a time where we used to look out the window and just let our imaginations go, and that's so good for our brains, and our kids aren't doing that enough. Did I see another? Yes.
I think part of it too, because part of this is there. We're saying it's hard. I forgot who said it. Somebody was like, I don't have other kids. Like if I send them out, there's no one else to go to, right? So part of that is also explaining, as we're showing them the real world, like knowing that this is part of their real world.
Yes.
But also then taking off the veil, right? Of, you know, some of the things of, you know, why did you choose that book or that cereal or something else, right? Because it's specific. Why do I choose the sweet cereals or whatever? At least that was a big thing for me, right? What are the things that have the cartoon characters on it? because they want to sell it to kids. I watched a whole like thing on what you call it, Mr. Beast or whatever, on how many takes and pictures, and he does studies to see what will cause kids to click on this. Facial, like, he'll take 15 different pictures of the same thing, but my face is this way, or I'm smiling, or I'm not, and does analysis to get clicks, right? So we could do the same thing with like books or something else, and say, which book would you choose? Well, this, even though this is a plain cover, what's inside, most people think is so much better than this thing that just looks good for you, or boxes or something. Like we can give concrete examples.
Absolutely. All right, I think we just have like 2 more clips left and they're pretty.
I know that what I've been showing you is shocking, depressing. This is a major, major problem, but here's the amazing thing. We can actually solve this if we work together. There are 4 simple norms. There are simple principles. Now, the work is hard, but we can do it if we work together. Here they are. First, no smartphone before high school. You can give your kids a flip phone. You can give them a basic phone if you want to be able to text them during the day when they're out and about. But don't put a supercomputer in their pocket that allows the world to reach them, that allows these companies to reach them with social media accounts. Now, this also applies to an iPad. An iPad is just as addictive as an iPhone. I'm not saying they can never use yours on a long ride. I'm just saying once they have their own device, which they can customize, it's likely to move to the center of their life and to block out everything else. Of course, they're going to need a computer at some point. That's the nature of education these days. But a laptop, a computer is not quite as addictive as a touchscreen. The second norm is no social media before 16. Do not let them open an account before they're 16. Social media is wildly inappropriate for children. It puts them into frequent contact with strangers, the massive social comparison, sexual predation and harassment. So just don't do it until they're at least 16. Now, of course, they're going to say, Mom, I'm missing out. I'm the only one. And it's true. If they're not on social media and everyone else is, they will be missing out on some things. But look at it this way. If they are on social media, what are they missing out on? And the answer is almost everything in life. In the real world, we have age limits on all kinds of activities. And there are 4 basic reasons we do that. Anything that's going to expose our kids to graphic sexuality, extreme violence, anything that's addictive, or anything that has physical dangers and harms, we tend to put age limits on it, and we all agree this is appropriate. Somehow in the virtual world, we've decided, it's too much trouble. Let everyone do everything at every age. That's crazy. And here's the one place where we really need help from legislators. Laws raising the age to 16 and mandating enforcement would really help us all out as parents, solve the collective action problem. We wouldn't hear from our 10-year-olds, Mom, everyone else is on Instagram, because they won't be. Australia has done us all a favor. They've implemented a law that will force the companies to age verify. But even as we wait for those laws to come to the United States and elsewhere, we can try as parents to agree with each other we're not going to let our kids on until they're 16, at least. The third norm is phone-free schools. This is a must. When I was growing up in the 1970s, if they had said, you can bring your television into class, you can bring a harmonica, you can bring a painting kit, you can bring a walkie-talkie, and that's insane. You have to pay attention to the teacher and to the other students. But when we let kids bring in a smartphone, they're bringing in all of these distractions. So the basic principle is that if any kid is able to send texts during the day, then all the kids will feel the pressure to check. Nobody wants to be left out. Nobody wants to be the only kid who doesn't know at lunch the thing that happened during third period. So the only way forward with this is to say, you come to school, you turn in whatever devices you have that can send and receive texts. They get put in an envelope, they get put in a locked pouch, they get put in a special locker, and you get it back at the end of the day. This is now happening all over the country and all over the world. More than a dozen states have already implemented rules, laws, that will give kids a phone-free or distraction-free education. But I have to note that some of these laws say you can't use the phone only during instructional time. That's not good enough. If it's banned during classroom time only, then everybody's going to be on their phones in between classes. So it has to be bell to bell, away for the day, distraction-free for the whole day. And the fourth norm This is really the hardest because this is the one that asks something from us, the parents. The fourth norm is far more independence, free play, and responsibility in the real world. Because this shouldn't just be about taking away the screens. What we're really up to here is giving our kids an amazing childhood, the kind of childhood that many of us had with adventure out in the real world. And so if we're going to reduce their screen time, reduce the degree to which they're sitting in front of a touch screen for 8, 10, 12 hours a day, we need to give them something great to do. We need to give them independence, risk, responsibility. And this is why I co-founded an organization called Let Grow with Lenore Skenazy, a woman who wrote the book Free Range Kids. One of our most powerful projects is called the Let Grow Experience. You simply ask your kid to come up with something that she thinks she can do on her own with your permission, but without you. So for example, some kids suggest, I think I'm 8 years old, I think I can take our dog for a walk around the block. Or I think I can walk to a store 3 blocks away and get a quart of milk. And you let them do it, and they come back, and the effect is transformative. When we give our kids some independence, they feel useful, they feel competent, they're happy. Here, see for yourself.
Independence is the key to developing happy, well-adjusted children.
It's hard for parents to let go. It's an opportunity for the kids to learn new things. They grow up.
I think Let Grow has been very pivotal in helping kids develop self-esteem at our school.
I did my homework by myself. I did a lemonade stand. I babysat my brother. I set up a tent. I went grocery shopping alone.
We all don't grow the same way. We all don't grow in the same soil. And Let Grow has been about taking your soil, owning it, figuring out what direction you have to grow in, and giving you the opportunity to try and see how that works out.
What do you want to say to the grown-ups?
I can do it. But I will still hold your hand. Sometimes.
They've chosen something that they think they can do, and then they do it on their own, and you're not micromanaging them. This is the way kids develop confidence, the sense that they can do things. Letting your kids practice independence is transformative, not just for the kids, but for you. So when my son was in 4th grade, he was 9 years old, my wife and I, because we knew Lenore Skenazy, we read her book, we decided we were going to let our son walk to school. He wanted to do it, he said he can do it. We let him walk to school in New York City, about a third of a mile away. And first I said, okay, you do it, but I'm going to follow behind you, 20 yards behind, and we're going to pretend I'm not there. So we did that a few times. Then the big day came. He's going to go out the door with his backpack on, we're going to wave goodbye. And then what do? We pick up our phones, because we gave him a smartphone. We didn't know any better. We gave him a smartphone so we could track him. So he heads out, we're hunched over our phones watching the little blue dot move west, move to 7th Avenue, which is a very complicated intersection. Our hearts are in our mouths. Will he make it? And we watch the little dot slide across the street. He did it. So that was the first day. I mean, it was really a challenge for us, not him. It was really a challenge for us. The second day, we do it again. We're watching the blue dot, but we're less nervous. Still nervous, but less nervous. And then by the third day, we're not nervous at all, and then that was it. We didn't track them anymore. And that's because anxiety habituates. The cure for anxiety is to expose yourself to what you're afraid of and see that nothing bad happens, and then it lessens. That's what the Let Grow experience does. It doesn't just change the kids, it changes us, the parents. In fact, Lenore helped me write the chapters of advice for parents and schools, and here are some of her top tips. All are described in the book. You can also find a lot more advice at letgrow.org. And here's another idea that flows out of my discussions with parents who are saying, are you saying we need to raise our kids without any screens? No, because screens do all kinds of different things. And here I think is a hopeful way to think about this. Stories are good. Humans are a storytelling animal. We've always taught our children by telling stories. So one kind of screen time is perfectly good. Imagine your kid watching a movie, a long story about people in a world that has moral values. They're watching it on a big screen with another person. It's still social. So if we think about story time, well, that's generally good. But here's what's bad: fragmenting time. If your child is given an iPad or a phone to play with, what are they going to do? They're going to do all sorts of things. They're going to watch videos. They're going to switch from one video to another as soon as it gets boring. iPad time or iPhone time is training in attention fragmentation. So those are the two ends of the spectrum. Story time under some circumstances can be really good, whereas iPad time, fragmenting time with a child sitting alone is generally not good for them. There are all kinds of things in between. We all have to make our own choices, but I hope those are some principles that will guide you. So those are the 4 norms. Once again, no smartphone before high school or age 14, no social media before 16, phone-free schools, and more childhood independence and free play. Now let's talk about what schools can do. So here again are the 4 norms, and clearly 2 of them are most relevant for schools. So norm number 3, phone-free schools. It's very important that the phone-free school run from the beginning of school to the end. A lot of schools are doing it just during instructional time, but that means that everyone's on it, on their phone during recess, during lunch, and in between classes. So a phone-free school has to be from the beginning of the day to the end of the day. Give the kids a chance to listen to each other and to their teachers. I can back up this assertion with data. Here's data from PISA, the International Measure of Scholastic Attainment. Buried within this very long study, there are 6 items about school alienation. It's statements like, I often feel lonely at school. Do you agree with that? Disagree with that? So Jean Twenge and I averaged together these 6 items and graphed them across time. And once again, no trend before 2012. And then after 2012, students around the world feel lonelier in school. Of course they do. You come to school and everyone's on their phone. And in between classes, everyone's on their phone. And here's even more evidence about why instructional time bans are not effective. The National Education Association surveyed its members about how disruptive phones are in their classes. And when you break up their answers by the kind of policy in their school, here's what you see. Many schools allow each teacher to set their own rules, which tends to default to the teacher giving up and the kids are using the phones in schools. That's what my kids have reported to me often happens in New York City public schools. But perhaps surprisingly, the policy of a school-wide ban during instructional time only actually is not much better because the kids are still thinking about the phone during class. The only policy that works is a truly phone-free policy where the kids do not have access to their phones from the time they arrive to the time they leave. The teachers in those schools report very low levels of disruption. They've got the kids back. They're speaking and the kids are, to a much greater extent, listening to them. And it's absolutely thrilling to see the way phone-free schools are spreading around the world. State after state is passing legislation, governors are promoting it, red state, blue state, this is a totally bipartisan issue. Countries around the world are doing this. Brazil passed legislation a month or 2 ago to go phone-free. Denmark just did it last week. It's happening around the world because the teachers hate the phones, the administrators hate the phones. So why weren't they banned long ago? And the reason administrators tell me is that they're afraid of pushback from parents who say, what if there's an emergency? What if I have to reach my child in an emergency? What if, God forbid, there's a school shooting? I would want to talk to my child. Now, as a parent of teenagers, I completely understand that. If there was such an emergency in my kid's school, I would desperately want to know that they were okay. I would want to call them or have them call me. But we have to do what is best for the kids, not what's best for us. And what all the school safety experts say is that in an emergency, the last thing you want is every kid pulling out their phone, calling their parents, crying on the phone, making noise, not listening, not observing. What you want is for the kids to do what they practice to do. To be quiet, to pay attention, to be attentive to their surroundings, and to do what the teacher tells them. Now then, once we get the phones out of school, well, they still have iPads and Chromebooks, and in most cases they can still send texts, they can watch videos, they can sometimes read social media, play video games. What do we do about that? And it's beginning to look like we need to get rid of that too. It's beginning to look like the goal of putting a computer or a tablet on every desk, which we thought was going to help education, it now appears to be harming it. UNESCO put out a report 2 years ago saying that students' use of devices beyond a moderate threshold may have a negative impact on academic performance. And this is primarily because these are all distraction machines. The distraction effects of educational technology generally outweigh whatever educational benefits were promised to us. Sweden was one of the first countries to get books and paper out of their schools, to move everything onto devices. So they were the first to realize what a mistake they made, and they are reversing course. So here's a helpful way to think about educational technology. A lot of these apps have tried to gamify education, make it like a video game. Give the kid a little reward if they get the right answer. But if you do that, if you gamify education for part of the day, what you're basically doing is training the dopamine system to expect that level of stimulation. So when you don't have the screen in front of you, when you have to just listen to a person talk, your brain is set to a low setting where it becomes painful, boring. So you can gamify much of the day and get higher engagement, but the brain will react so that the rest of the day is more boring. The net effect can be very, very negative. And then the fourth norm, far more independence, free play, and responsibility in the real world. Parents can do that at home, but boy, schools can do a lot of it with their policies around recess, with their policies around independence. I hope you'll visit letgrow.org. We have a variety of free programs and materials for schools and educators. The other program we have, which is widely popular at schools, is called Play Club. It's an incredibly simple idea. Often parents are a little afraid to let their kids go out and about in their town, but they usually trust the school. They trust the school playground. So why not open the playground up before school starts? Why not keep it open after school? Play Club is that simple. Here's an example of a boys' school in Maryland that got amazing results from doing this. They added a second recess and they put a play club before school started. Half an hour before school started, they opened the playground, and guess what? The boys loved it. They would come to school to play games, to play soccer. Their truancy problems, their lateness problems almost vanished because the kids wanted to come to play. And as soon as class started, they were ready to learn. They'd already been running around. And there's so much that schools can do to communicate to the parents how important it is that we all back off and give them more independence. So for example, when my son switched from elementary school to middle school, on the first day of class, they invited all the parents to come, they sat us down in the auditorium, they gave us some orientation materials, and then they said, "This better be the last time we see you in the morning. We want you to let your kids come to school by themselves." So in conclusion, our children's brains have been growing around their phones, kind of like the way this tree has been growing around this tombstone. Now this sounds awful. This is a gigantic problem. But here's the amazing thing. We can actually solve this. We can roll back the phone-based childhood if we do it together. So if you're watching this video with other parents or other teachers, congratulations, you're already taking collective action. And whether you're alone or with others, I invite you to join the movement. Come to our website, anxiousgeneration.com. We have a lot of materials for you as parents, as teachers, as legislators, and as Gen Z. And please sign up for our Substack, afterbabble.com. It's a free Substack. You'll get roughly once a week a mailing with our latest research. If we work together, if we stay strong, if we support each other, we can win.
All right, so delaying smartphones until high school. As a counselor, I would appreciate if everyone did that because that would take a lot of the drama out of my office. Because it really does. A lot of things come from that. And they just really, they don't need it. There's no reason. And delaying social media until 16 when they're out of our school. But no, and really, because think about what they're being exposed to, right? So you have to think about that in what you're even exposed to, and the settings. They only do so much to filter.
So question. So like anecdotally, this school, what is the norm?
I would. So you mean for like currently in our middle school? Oh, like
like because I have a first grader, so I have like no idea. Like
So
I know K-pop Demon Hunters is like a thing in first grade that I'm like, I don't like it. It's not my thing. But like already with that in particular, it comes home. So I can only imagine like third grade, fourth grade, fifth grade, like
Yes.
when does this all begin here?
So I will say, I think that we have a lot of like-minded parents here. As, I'm gonna put on my parent hat now, I will say, at least in my son's core group of friends, we are very aligned, and they will not have the cell phones and the things like that. Now, he's in fourth grade. There maybe, I don't know of any kids that at least talk about having one. I know a couple fifth graders that have talked about it, but I've done lessons in seventh grade where I've talked about cell phones and social media, and half the class will say, I don't have a cell phone or social media. So like, I will say it is far, there's a lot more parent support here. In the public school, I think fourth grade tends to be when the cell phones come into play. And I see that at the park. You drive by the park, you see the kids are sitting at the park, but they're on their phones. And we're very lucky here that we are a completely phone-free school. Prior to COVID, our students used to have to come in and put their phones in a bin. We no longer do that because that is kind of gross. So now they have to be off and in their backpacks, and they're really not even supposed to have them in aftercare because we've even had some issues there, right? Because it's like the second that aftercare starts, the older kids, they're pulling out their phones, and then there's kids that want to see, well, because they're not on social media, so then they want to see what's going on, right? And that's when that dangerous stuff happens, right? So we definitely, are a phone-free school, which is amazing. And it's just something to keep in the back of your mind if you're ever not at our school, to make sure that you know what your child's school policy is with the cell phones. And the more independence and free play, one of the things that I did with my son this summer was, my parents live up in New Hampshire, so on the way, every time we stopped to get gas, it was my son's responsibility to take the cash in, go, and we rehearse on how to say, fill it up on pump 6 or whatever it is, right? And then he came out and we taught him how to pump his gas. We're in New Jersey, we don't know how to do that, right? So when we have these opportunities, so he's in it, and then he had to put it back, and he goes into the concession, and he gets the change. I need the change for pump 6. And he has this big smile on his face, because he's like, and my husband and I just sat in the car, and we let him go in, and we let him come out, and he's 9 years old, and he was so excited, right? And it's one of those things, it's the little things, but they really grow so fast when they have these little itty bitty pieces of freedom and independence. And I love the idea of asking your child, like, what is something that they can do? Even practicing, like when they need a dentist appointment or a doctor appointment, practicing, okay, have your child, I need my cleaning, right? That's like an anxiety provoking thing, right? Even at some point having them do their own laundry. Like I always say, like, by the time my son is 12, he's doing his own laundry, I'm touching his stuff, gross. But we'll see. But that's something simple, right? He'll be tall enough to be able to put his stuff in and figure it out, and we'll teach him, right? It's not like we're just expecting him to go and do things. But I'd rather him learn at 12 than he's going off to college and now all of a sudden I'm trying to teach him how to do it. And that way he can figure it out, right? And there's no reason to wait till they're leaving. So work with your kids. See how it really is very cool to watch them get very excited and think, oh, I'm a big kid now, or they feel really mature and they feel proud of themselves. And it's a really cool thing to see. So, just remember that a lot of it's our anxiety, it's not their anxiety. And we're the ones that give it to them. So like letting them do these things, right? And not always being scared. And you can practice things. Like when I practice with my son when he goes to the park, I'm like, okay, if you feel scared, if somebody's bothering you, I'm not there, you find someone with, that is a mom. Start calling her mom. Mom, I need help. Mom, this is happening. And as a mom, if a child were to come up to me and start calling me mom, I would be like, okay, something's going on here, right? And I think that's when our motherly instinct kicks in. If we go to Patriot Stadium or whatever, I always say, if we're separated, find a mom. Just find a mom, right? Because we will take care of it, right? And that's one of those things. So it helps. And I think that might be pretty much it. And if we can kind of all get on board and have these conversations, as a community, it really helps a lot too. I know I have so I'm gonna put you on the spot. So as a 7th grade parent, how many would you say a majority of kids have cell phones?
I think in their grade, yes.
Okay.
My girls do not have cell phones, and I think it's extremely difficult. But we are adamant that they're not getting them.
Yes.
Until at least,
Yeah.
I don't know, freshman year, if I can hold out longer,
Yes.
I will. But we find that everyone has them and they just, we're dealing with it.
You're
It's
dealing with
tough.
it, right? It is, it's very tough.
But we always say, you're going to be no place without us
Yes.
in proximity.
Yes.
Or with another parent that can't reach out to me. Like,
Absolutely.
and that's why they don't need them.
Yes.
In my opinion.
You know, cell phones, like we were taught a while ago, like when your child's going to someone's house, like maybe you should ask them, like, do you have weapons in your house? Like, do I need to know about anything like that, right? So now it's like when you bring your kid to a sleepover, what is your cell phone policy in your house? What is your iPad policy in your house? You know, and if you're having a sleepover, right, taking the kid's cell phone so that way they're not out there. If you need to call your mom, your cell phone's right here, but we're not going to be having a cell phone party in the basement or wherever we are, you know, doing those kind of things, because what other kids can see, you know, and all that, those kinds of things. So that's a big parent tip that I would recommend, especially when it comes to sleepovers, because that's when a lot of the stuff kind of comes out. It's unsupervised and all those kinds of things. Yeah, so, but what do you guys think is the hardest to implement? I mean, I would assume, you know, delaying the cell phones. I think a flip phone is a reasonable compromise, but for some reason these kids all think they need to have the iPhone with all the things, right?
One of the things that we did was because we want them to be able to call people and feel comfortable with it, we put a landline back in our house.
Yes.
So they can call my parents, or they can call my mom, like, just so that they can, how do I actually push the buttons if I needed to?
Yes.
Right? You don't even think about that, they don't understand how to do that. So,
Absolutely.
like, push the on button.
Yeah, we also have a landline for emergencies as well, and we sat and we taught our son how to use the phone, and we got a Google. It's free. Google, I think there's like a one-time fee or whatever, and as long as you use that number like once a year, you don't have to pay for it. So it's a great way to have a landline, and they get their own privacy. And the thing is kids are getting smarter now too, because they know that parents are reading their stuff, so they want to talk on the phone. They want to be like back in the day when we had these conversations, right? Like they don't want parents to know all the things, and if they're texting it, then the parents know all the things. So if the parents are doing their job, so it's definitely something.
If you want to mess with them, give them a rotary phone. Watch
There we go.
Are you saying we need to raise our kids without any screens? No, because
we did.
screens do all
That's
kinds
what
of
I
different
thought
things.
that it was over. Okay. So I did add a couple resources. So I ended up taping this so that way we're gonna put it on our YouTube channel, and I'm gonna be sending out the information, the slides, and I do have a handout that has a bunch of information, books, and all that kind of stuff. And this is some of those action plans that we talked about. But I just want to. Is there anything else any questions, comments, anything that is left unanswered? Problems or help?
Is this information you'd consider giving directly to the kids? Because I feel like it's one thing when it comes from mom and you're like, no.
Yeah.
But when it's another thing, like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 reasons why this is just not great for you.
I will say our technology teacher is really great at talking about these online things. My office is right here, so sometimes I'll be sitting there with my door open, and there was one day, I forget what age kids are in here, tech is 3rd grade and up. So Mrs. Sharp is like, okay, close your Chromebooks and take out a pencil, we're gonna do something. And the student said, this is tech, we don't use pencils in tech. And it's like, okay, but we're trying to get away from that, right? So like she even talks about how we need to take breaks from these things. She talks a lot about that. Even in my classes, I start to kind of talk about the social things. When they get to 5th grade, they have a weekly class with me. And I talk about, when I'm talking about bullying, I talk about online bullying too, because that happens and all of those kind of things. So it is kind of woven into the curriculum. Absolutely.
I am excited to see if there will be a trend back to paper.
Yes.
So with my eldest, she's an 8th grader, 4th grader, 2nd grader. I see with my 8th grader, I think they began this in 7th grade also. In social studies or science, they're allowed to make their notes, or they make a game. I'll back up. In order to study for a test, they're encouraged, or it's one of the options to make themselves a game with the questions. Kahoot.
Yes.
I'm not a fan of
Quizlet.
They make Quizlet, not a fan of Kahoot, writing that stuff. I'm a fan of learn how to make an outline, learn how to read the text, learn how to understand what you read in the paragraph. And I'm seeing that now with the 8th grader, that nothing's sinking in, so unless it's all gamified, she doesn't want to do it.
Yes.
So,
I absolutely
so
agree with that.
the make the slides for yourself, for your study guide notes, isn't working.
Right.
I mean, this,
So I'm hoping to see if they can move in that direction.
but the highlighting of the textbooks.
Yeah, and it's bring an outline, absolutely.
I will say, I was upstairs today and I was walking down the hallway and I actually stopped because the hallway was covered with all handwritten projects from a 7th grade class and an 8th grade class, 2 science investigations. They were illustrated by hand. The whole thing was, I took pictures on my phone because I was so impressed.
Yeah.
And just to see their handwriting, I almost wanted to cry. I was like, oh my gosh, it was just beautiful. It's hanging upstairs. I mean, I don't know if people are up there. If Mrs. Cohen's here, but
yeah, absolutely.
Take a minute to look at it.
Yes,
Really
and as a school, we really are trying to get away from that technology because of that. Yes.
Just one quick comment on that. There's actually a lot of studies on that say that the written hand and the simplification of education in that way, sort of getting back to some of that, actually has a huge effect on the working memory. If your working memory is not fluid, you can't learn. You can't absorb math. You can't do what you need to do because the internet and the stimulus that comes in, the stimuli that come in through that really clogs up like sludge the working memory. So you had your kid on the internet or whatever, they're on their way to school, they're looking at this, and by the time they get into school, their working memory is actually moving slower than it did originally before even viewing any of this. So now you're asking them to sit through a math class or sit through this or the increased pressures that we have in school now, and we're kind of setting them up to fail.
Yes, absolutely.
So it is kind of nice to get back to some of that paperwork every now and then, you know what I mean? I think.
Yeah, and I think with ChatGPT and AI, I think we're gonna have to do a lot of handwriting because how else are we gonna know if it's from a student, right? And that's just the world that we're living in. And I know college essays got brought up in the very beginning. Like I wouldn't be surprised if that's how we end up going or something. Like in-person kind of things because unless we're watching a student handwrite something, we don't know necessarily. Kids try to turn in things with all this vocabulary, and we're like, what does this mean, right? It happens, right? So we're trying to mitigate that as well.
What is ICS doing to kind of implement this change away from technology?
And a lot of it, we're just being encouraged to use more pen and paper and those kind of things away from, even in technology class, they're shutting their computers and they're drawing things out on slides instead of actually starting them on the slides, right? So there's like those kind of projects I think we were asked to, and Mrs. Forgiano can speak on this if she would like to as well, but we were asked as a faculty to try to see where we can adjust to try to eliminate those screens because we don't want the kids on the screens because it changes their behavior a lot, it really does.
I was just gonna say, it's so contradictory to what we do in our everyday life as parents in the workforce, right? I'm encouraged to use AI every day, pop it into AI and see what it comes out with, and that's what we send. My kids see me do that. It's like, so you don't want to teach them that, but when they get into the workforce, that's where we're heading. And it's like this blend of when it's acceptable and when it's not, and it's such a fine line right now.
Yeah, and I think what we're finding is that kids kind of teach themselves this stuff. Like when we don't really need to teach them how to use ChatGPT. It's very user-friendly. A lot of these things are user-friendly. So like back in the day when we had our typing classes or our computer, it was like how to do, right? Our kids are almost coming out of the womb knowing how to do these things these days, right? Like you see these babies that are flipping and whatever. So that is part of it, right? So I think that as educators, we need to get back to education traditionally to make sure that our kids are learning and using their brains because AI is going to make us stupider. And as much as it helps us, because I use it too, we all use it, right? Like I have a great idea for a lesson plan, let me put it in there and then it like makes it organized. And it's helpful, but it's a tool, right? And it has to stay in our toolbox, and we also have to be able to pull from our own imagination and things like that. And that's what AI is gonna do, it's gonna stifle our imaginations and our creativity. And that's what makes us human, right? That's what makes us not robots. So it's really important that our kids are still flexing that very important muscle.
Just one more quick thing, if there's any way for indoor recess, if technology could be taken off the menu of choices to do, I think that would go a long way.
I think that's already been implemented. So yes. I was laughing before first Thursday, I went out to go see Miss Kelsey, who's one of the 8th grade teachers, and the boys in her class, the girls must have all been in IC singles, they weren't in the room, I don't know, but they played this baseball game. And so they're up there, these 8th grade boys, and one's the catcher, and they have this paper ball, and they're using their hands, and they're going crazy, and I'm sitting there, I'm like, this is amazing, I love this, because like, they're playing that, whereas in years past, you walk in, they're drooling on a computer, right, and that's not, so it's nice, they're getting their energy out before mass, like, they're having this time, and even during indoor recess, right, they should be playing games with each other, they should be interacting, and that is a big thing. A lot of people who have come to our school from the public school, we've heard that they're disappointed with the amount of screen time that they're getting in the public schools. And so that's a good thing for us, because we're like, listen, we're trying to get away from that. So come here, join us. And we want that like-minded parent who understands like this is a big deal, and it's our child's. You get one chance with these kids, right? You want to do the best job that you can, and we read all these books when they're babies, but I feel like once we get to like that kid stage, we just kind of like let go of those kind of things, and it's important to continue to educate yourself. And because these are realities, and there's all these peer pressures from the other kids and the other parents, and you want to make sure that you're sticking to your guns. And those of you who've already maybe given your child access, it's okay to also admit that you made a mistake. I'm sorry, we're going to give you a flip phone now. It is what it is, and they're probably going to be really, really mad at you for a while, but at the same time, like, they're going to get over it, because as parents, we're not supposed to be their friends. We're supposed to know what's best for them, and it's totally cool to be like, Mom and Dad made a mistake, and now YouTube is not allowed in our house anymore. I'm sorry, and you have those conversations with them. You explain to them. And that's okay too. Mommy and Daddy care about your brain, and we want to make sure that you're healthy, and we want you to be outside and playing, and it's just not good for you. There's a lot of different ways that you can do that. And I promise that there's other like-minded parents out there. Just make sure that you're having those conversations. As I say, when you're having these play dates and things like that, you want to know what your child is going to be exposed to. You want to know what video games they're going to be playing, if they're going to be playing. And you don't want to be that parent, but like sometimes I have been that parent who's been like, if we're having a play date, can we just have no screens? And I have no problem saying that, because sometimes, it just has to be that way. And hopefully other parents respect your wishes with that stuff. And if they don't, then maybe that's not a parent that you should have, your child around, right? So these are the tough things, but this is, as I said, we got one chance. So let's try to make sure that we're raising good humans, right? And yeah, any other questions, comments?
This is great.
Okay. I'd just like to make one comment. I've had my older children are out of college, and I was really lucky to have those first years up until late mid-school, middle school, where they didn't have any exposure to anything, and the phones were very basic. And then once the high school came, it was such a big change, it was such a big shift. From the kids calling each other on the phone, let's do a play date, talking to each other socially at school, after school, wanting to hang out on the playground, to it became an insecurity, like the anxiety, like, well, what if they're doing something else? Because you can tell where they are, you can tell if they're with other friends. They didn't, have that interaction, where it then led, I feel like, into the college years even, where I'd be looking on the college campuses, and I don't know, those of us that grew up going to college, the doors were open, people were interacting, they were outside, just hanging out if they didn't have class, and I would see none of that. And it was really like, my oldest daughter actually switched colleges because of that, because the college she thought was going to be so socially interactive, it had the football team, it had this and that, but the kids were all in their rooms and didn't interact. And I felt like it did affect,
the social skills, and even when looking for jobs or interacting. I said I felt like we had my older ones always having to socialize with adults because of what we did. So it was interesting to see that so many kids couldn't.
Yeah.
So and the same thing with, I feel like, I think it's great that the school is also going back to the paper and pen and incorporating the electronics as needed, as supplementary, because it's making that communication, that team building, like asking questions rather than just looking at the computer and going back and forth and being able to open anything. Because I remember, why are you calling me or texting me from class?
Yes.
I'm like, you should not be doing that. And we're being told, oh, we're in high school and our teacher says we have to have our phone, so why don't you have your phone? And so it's like, I'm glad to see it's changing because I feel it affects them longer term versus.
Just real quick, there was a recent study that came out and everybody was like celebrating it because stats tell you the story they want to. Teen pregnancy is way down and binge drinking is way down and all these things. Oh, we're doing great. We're educating our kids, but then diving a little bit deeper into it, it's because they're not socializing with each other. They're not partying in a field anymore. They're not hooking up. They're not doing those things because they don't talk to each other, right? And it's like, okay, it's great, right? Like that's what we want. But at the same time, but why are they not? It's because they're in different dorm rooms, right? It's kind of hard to party with, whatever it is, right? And when you think again about your college experience and your high school experience, right? Kids aren't having that anymore because they're all in their own kind of worlds. So again, thank you so much for carving the time out. This went a little bit longer, but thank you so much, and I appreciate it.